GMOs. Are GMOs bad for you, or is this fear unfounded? Well, look around you. What do you see? Right now, you are looking at the screen, and you're probably seated somewhere. If you are at home, you could be sitting with your pets, and if you have a dog, you might be next to your pet dog. This dog of yours is, guess what? A GMO! Dogs are one of the first GMOs made by humans, and you probably have no problem with them. Everything we eat, from corn to beef to even our organic blueberries, have been genetically modified, not by scientists, but by us. We, or at least our ancestors at one point, genetically modified our food, and it still continues to be done by every farmer. This method of genetically modifying our food is called selective breeding, because of the fact that farmers want to grow the most amount of food without consuming too much effort or land. They will naturally replant the seeds of the best performing plants. On the other hand, we have the kind of GMOs that everybody thinks are bad, and are, if and only if, they are used maliciously and or improperly. The GMOs these days are just a step up from selective breeding. In selective breeding, you take the organisms with the best traits for you, while with GMOs, you take the best organisms and add the genetics you find advantageous. This may sound very bad, as though genetics could do some serious damage to us, but the thing is that the GMOs have passed a colossal amount of tests, and a massive amount of regulations have to be taken into account. These GMOs could be good and bad, and there is no long-term data to suggest either way, except for on the good side. The GMOs in use today are mainly GMOs that make it easier for farmers, such as GM corn. Genetically modified corn is made to be corn and a pesticide all in one. That's why 80% of the corn grown in Canada is genetically modified, using the soil bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, or Bt, as a toxin in every cell of the plant, means that even the corn that we eat has it. If a corn earworm decides to eat a bit of the corn, it will also ingest the Bt. The Bt attaches to the receptors of some insect's guts. Then they rupture the insect's guts, killing it. In Canada, the following GM crops and animals are on the market. Number 1, GM canola. Number 2, GM corn. Number 3, GM soy. Number 4, GM sugar beet. White sugar beet for sugar processing only. Number 5, GM alfalfa for animal feed only. Number 6, GM Atlantic salmon. The majority of the GMOs end up as processed foods and animal feed. The following GMOs are also grown around the world. GM apple, grown in the Washington state. Number 8, GM papaya from Hawaii. Number 9, GM squash from the US. Some varieties, including yellow crookneck squash. Number 10, GM cotton, grown in the US, China, and India. Number 11, genetically modified pineapple, grown in Costa Rica. The GM, corn, soy, and cotton make up for the majority of the GM crops. In fact, it accounts for 99% of all GMOs produced in the world. If you take GM cotton, for example, then you can see that it uses far less water, while at the same time producing more cotton. In fact, GMO cotton looks and feels just like regular cotton. It is easy, durable, lightweight, soft, breathable, and also absorbent. GMO cotton is a natural material, bio-based, biodegradable, compostable, and recyclable, according to some sources, except can GMO cotton really be compostable and recyclable and bio-based and a natural material? Huh? I don't know. Anyways, as GMO cotton is breathable, it can be worn in warm weather and lets air pass through it. For such reasons, GMO cotton is far better for the environment than normal cotton. Other GM foods are simply better. A quote from MedlinePlus.gov says that GMOs can result in more nutritious food, tastier food, disease and drought-resistant plants that require fewer environmental resources, such as waters and fertilizer. Less use of pesticide, increased supply of food with reduced cost and longer shelf life. Faster growing plants and animals. Food and more desirable traits such as potatoes that produce less cancer-causing substances when fried, and medicinal foods that could be used as vaccines or other medicines. End quote. This means that concerns that the GMOs are less healthy are unfounded. Research also shows that they are just fine for your health and don't produce allergic reactions. I just wanted to point out that you can't trust everything you can read. You may see a whole lot of sources showing that GMOs are bad, horrible, terrible! And they could be. But as I take a look into the reasoning, it all seems to fall apart. For example, take CBAN, or the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network. Under the issues page, you can see that they say that genetically engineered trees are a problem, and also agrofuels or biofuels are a problem related to genetically engineered food? Ay, 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 ay. But when you click on those links, which say that GE trees or agrofuels or biofuels are bad, and the links say read more, you never find out that GMOs are bad. You just see GMOs are bad on the very first page, and then on the second page, like, gone? Huh? Do these guys even know what they're talking about? Or do they just want to misinform the entire world? As for the environment section, they actually do provide some reasoning on how they're bad, such as super weeds and super pests and biodiversity loss. But these are not specific to GM crops. If you use pesticides or herbicides, you will over time create super weeds and super pests. And as for the biodiversity loss, any mass farming activities will result in the same thing. Like, what is this? Anyways, as for the increased herbicide use, what they say is true. Start quote. The widespread cultivation of GM herbicide-tolerant crops has pushed up the use of herbicides such as glyphosate. Herbicide sales in Canada have increased by 234% since GM crops have been introduced, 1994 to 2020. End quote. Clicking on the source, you come to a PDF titled, quote, are GM crops better for the environment? -e-web.pdf, end quote. This PDF has a lot of information on GM crops and pesticide use, and as stated, similarly, numbers from the industry-associated CropLife Canada show that pesticide sales have increased by 73% from 2001 to 2013, from 1.27 billion to 2.2 billion. By following the sources down to the associated page and clicking on the source, you know what you get? Seriously, guess. Leave it in the comments. You know what you get? A 404 page not found. What is this? Do they even know what they're doing? Seriously, if your source is a 404 page not found, are you credible anymore? No. So weird. Anyways, it is possible that the source was there, but now it is gone. And the reason that pesticide use has gone up is because of the fact that crops are being grown. More crops are being grown. Lots more crops are being grown. And also the cost of pesticide has increased. Another contributing factor is that weeds, or rather pests, have gotten resistant to the pesticide used on them. Anyways, enough interruptions. Back to the main thing. GMOs. Are they bad for you or good for you? Well, as it probably seems, I think GMOs are good for Earth, at least for now. Our current technology lets us do lots of things with GMOs. That means we can do much more with them as time goes by. If we decide to end our fear around this emerging technology, we might as well go so much further. This is so much like nuclear energy. It is our best bet right now. Yet, for some stupid reason, we keep it in the dark and refuse to let it help us in our ultimate quest to stop climate change. If we were to stop the use of GMOs right now, then we would lose out on so much potential food and good sources of it. We have seen that over 20 years the GMOs have been on the market, that there has been no noticeable negative change in our health, at least directly due to GMOs. There are usually three things that farmers have to worry about: weeds taking over, insects destroying harvest, and harsh weather killing crops. GMOs are made to withstand these problems. Certain genetically engineered organisms, GEOs, can survive herbicides. Some can take insects, and some can even resist bad weather. For the insect-resistant plants, they can significantly reduce the amount of pesticide we use on them. The ones that can survive herbicides make it so much easier. All you have to do is spray the entire field, and all the weeds die. The plants and the crops survive. This is so good, but people are scared of it. This is unjust. The weather-resistant ones can survive with less water or higher temperatures. All around, good for Earth, good for us, good for humanity, good for the world, good, good, and good. Farmers and agricultural companies are the ones who find GMOs the most useful to them, as you might guess. It may seem that we don't see any significant benefit, but this is another misconception. We, as the end user, also see a tremendous benefit. The direct effect is lower food costs, but other benefits equal lower soil erosion, seeing as the tilling is not required to remove weeds, and lower pesticide use, as the plants can sometimes take care of themselves, as in the case of the genetically modified corn, and there are also some other benefits. GMOs also help animals. If you take a look at the pig, its pancreas were used for insulin. This insulin is life critical to some. And before the use of genetically engineered organisms, or GEOs, we had to use about 1/4 of a ton of pancreas just for a singular ounce of insulin. Let that sink in. 1/4 of a ton for 1 ounce. One. That's it. 1 ounce. Now, thanks to GMOs, we can let the diabetic humans survive. And that could even be you. You could be surviving and not killing 1/4 of a ton of pancreas worth of animals just for every ounce of insulin you need. This could be you. If you are diabetic, you could be killing so many pigs. But thanks to genetically modified organisms, you can still survive. And we don't need to massacre tons of animals. For this reason, GEO insulin is very widely accepted. The other kinds of genetically modified organisms, which almost nobody has a problem with, are medicines. The medicines commonly produced with GMOs are the kinds of medicines that have to be taken from a donor's blood. Like, literally, the only way to get the medicine is stick a needle into someone, take their blood, and that's the only way. Like, it's so bad. Because taking the donor's blood has very many problems, including disease transmission and unreliable supply. The medical use of GMOs is accepted by the vast majority of us. The problem is with GMO food. Even though research has proven that it is perfectly fine for us. To see where the problem comes from, you should take a look at in the way which gene editing works. This is a good analogy quoted from ag.purdue.edu. Start quote. Gene editing is when a scientist makes a tiny controlled change in the DNA of a living organism. The simplest way to envision this process is to imagine editing a giant manuscript. You flip through the hundreds of pages until you reach the one sentence you wish to alter. And then you carefully change a single word. This creates only a tiny change in an enormously complex Word document, or, in this case, genome. End quote. This tiny change is all that is necessary to give the plant super plant powers and make a GMO, genetically modified organism, or genetically engineered organism. The later term is more commonly used in the scientific community and more accurately describes the process. While selective breeding can be considered making a GMO, a GEO can only be made when you change a bit of the DNA through a scientific process. Gene editing can be used to make a GEO, and it can also be used for many other purposes. A commonly used method for making GEOs is CRISPR-Cas9. CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly, interspaced, short, palindromic, repeats, and the Cas9 part stands for CRISPR associated protein 9. CRISPR-Cas9 has generated a lot of interest in the recent years. This is because it is faster, more effective, and cheaper than any other method. This method was adopted from the naturally occurring immunity process in bacteria. If a bacteria is infected with a virus, the bacteria will keep a tiny bit of the virus DNA. Then, the bacteria will insert the DNA into its own, in a very specific pattern known as, you guessed it, CRISPR. The array permits the bacteria to remember the virus, so if the virus or another closely related virus attacks the bacteria, then some corresponding bits of the RNA from the CRISPR array come and attach to various parts of the virus DNA. Using Cas9 or another technique, the bacteria will cut the DNA and kill the virus. Quoted from Medline Plus, researchers adapted this immune defense system to edit DNA. They create a small piece of RNA with a short guide sequence that attaches to a specific target sequence in a cell's DNA, much like the RNA segments bacteria produce the CRISPR array. This guide RNA also attaches to the Cas9 enzyme. When introduced into cells, the guide RNA recognizes the intended DNA sequence, and the Cas9 enzyme cuts the DNA at the targeted location, mirroring the process in bacteria. Although Cas9 is the enzyme that is used the most often, other enzymes, for example CPF1, can also be used. Once the DNA is cut, researchers use the cell's own DNA repair machinery to add or delete pieces of genetic material, or to make changes to the DNA by replacing an existing segment with a customized DNA sequence. End quote. This technology could be used in humans to prevent or treat diseases. For now, though, we are still trying to use this technology on animal models in research labs. It has been explored in clinic trials along with research trials for lots of diseases. In these clinical trials, we have successfully edited human genomes. This means that some of us now have DNA made by scientists, but this is probably a topic for another time. Anyways, technologies like CRISPR have been used on animals to let them have better lives. An example of this is the gene editing in living pigs. The main goal of this is to make pigs less susceptible to an infection called porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, or PRRS. When even one animal in a group gets PRRS, then the entire population must be euthanized, or, in other words, killed. This is done to limit and stop the spread of PRRS. With gene editing, we are able to greatly minimize the waste produced. In the US, all genetically modified organisms and gene editing is monitored by the government. The majority of the genetically modified animals today are produced in a lab, not as forced labor, but as models. They are to show what happens when you change a certain gene. Does the animal become resistant to a disease, or maybe it becomes susceptible? Maybe they are healthier, or maybe less. There are, however, some genetically modified organisms that you and I can eat. One of them includes genetically modified salmon. They are designed to mature faster and are approved by the US Food and Drug Association. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in learning more, you may want to subscribe to my channel right here. And if you want to learn about some other stuff that I've created, you may be interested in my video about the Parker Space Probe which touched the sun. Thanks, and that's it. Bye!